So now that we have that hinge pattern in a good position, we're gonna get into the kettlebell deadlift. Now, I like this as a primary tool to teach people how to deadlift because it allows them to learn how to create tension on an implement without having to have a barbell, which can then be somewhat of a complex matter for the brain where we sort of tend to overthink it. So when we have a kettlebell for the deadlift, this is nice because it keeps the weight within our center of gravity. And the moment we put weight within our center of gravity, it allows the brain to actually work more efficiently, and our brain doesn't have to overthink about what's going on. So when we go through the kettlebell deadlift, there's a couple things that you're gonna need to know. So if you're a coach who's listening in, or if you're a trainee that is trying to get into fitness, let me move this barbell away a little bit. So if you're a trainee that is looking to perfect their deadlift and go through it, what you may want to consider is, at what point do you falter in your movement? And so when you look at the first video, we talked about the hinge position. So if you're somebody that lacks mobility because they sit all day, they drive all day, or they just lack stability in their lower back or in their midsection, you may want to consider elevating the implement off the floor. And we do that by simply having a small box off the ground. You can grab one of those bumper plates and kind of stack them up as high as you need, because you build the stability from the top down. And if you don't have the mobility requirements to go from the bottom, then we just raise that up. Same thing goes if you're listening in and you're doing barbell deadlifts. You may want to raise up the weight off the floor, and we call that a block deadlift or a elevated deadlift. And it doesn't matter at what height you're really lifting, unless you're competing from a powerlifter standpoint, because it is an arbitrary height. And if you're tall, if you have long limbs, sometimes the height of the barbell or the implement doesn't just fit your needs. So unless you're powerlifting and you need to lift from a certain height, of course, you're gonna follow those guidelines and regulations, but for the everyday gym goer that's still gonna get fit and healthy, doesn't really matter as long as you're training within the, your appropriate sort of needs and goals. So let's go through the kettlebell deadlift. Now here, what I like to think about is sort of from the feet up. Okay, now when we're looking at the deadlift, I want a strong grip of the floor with your foot. So now, remember what I said in the first video. Your big toe, your pinky toe, and your heel are gripping the floor for dear life. And I always I kind of laugh with my clients about this, and I say, if somebody were to push you, or if there was a big gust of wind, could you stand your ground? And what I mean by that is sort of flex yourself into the floor and ground yourself. That's step one. Now from here, what I want to think about is that kettlebell should be in between my feet. In fact, what I always say is put it in between your ankles. That way it kind of sits behind and it forces you to sit back into your deadlift, okay? Now I'm gonna go from the side here, that way you can kind of see what's going on. And we are strongest with the glute. And so when we pick up a weight off the floor, what we don't want to do, what we want to avoid is this. We don't want to drive those knees forward into a squat position to pick up the weight. You won't be as strong. You want to shift all of the weight on your primary engine, which is your glutes. So from here, we're going to go through that hinge pattern, because we're essentially just going through a hip hinge before we get into anything else that's going to be deadlift focused. So chest up, pull back those shoulder blades, abs are a little bit braced, okay? Now from here, remember, somebody has a string around your waist, they're pulling you from behind, you're gonna hinge to the implement. In this case, it'll be the kettlebell handle, okay? So now here's the thing. If I go through my full hinge, I'm gonna think hips go back, 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 back. Now, this is my full hinge. Now, obviously I can't grab the kettlebell because it's lower than that, and this is where the deadlift begins. I'm gonna think about driving my hips down up until I meet my hands to the handle of the kettlebell, okay? So I'll do that again so you guys can see it. So I'm gonna hinge, 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 hips go back. Now in this position, I'm gonna drop my hips, but notice how the torso angle remains the same. Nothing changes in my stability. All that happens is that I shove my hips further down so I can meet my hands to the kettlebell, as opposed to this. Full hinge, and then I just sort of round myself to grab the barbell, or to grab the handle of the kettlebell rather. So this position is a weaker position than if I start from the top down and I go hips back, 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 full hinge, drop the hips, nothing changes in my stability point or in my torso angle, okay? So that's step one, is again, pull yourself into the hinge for your deadlift to begin. That way you can set yourself up with the most amount of success. So now, let's go through the sequence of the stability point of a deadlift. Now, you wanna make the implement, whether it's a barbell or in this case the kettlebell, you wanna make the implement part of you, that way you can control it, right? And one thing that I always often see with people when they're working out is that they sort of don't really put their all into it. And if you're looking for like really great results, you need to think about making that implement part of you, that way your muscles can go through the proper action. So let's get into the setup. So we're gonna hinge, hips go back, I'm gonna drop my hips. Now, the one thing I'm gonna say here is I want you to grip the handle like you wanna strangle it. So choke it as hard as you can. Now in that position, what's gonna happen when I crush the grip on the handle, we call that irradiation, some people say. That's gonna cause all of the tension from my grip to go all the way up to my shoulder. That's what creates stability to make sure that my lower back does not get any injury or cause any shifting of my spine. So I'm gonna crush the grip in this position. I'm going to pull back the shoulder blades to continue that bracing component. And then I'm also gonna think about driving my knees slightly out. Now I'm not gonna go completely out like I'm squatting. I'm just gonna create a little bit of tension from the ground up to my glute. Now in this position, I'm gonna hold for a few seconds. I'm gonna brace, I'm gonna hold, I'm gonna breathe hard, and if I do this correctly enough, ooh, it's hard. I shake, everything starts to burn because I'm active and I'm strong. I'm thinking about this when I'm doing this. So this kettlebell weighs 88 pounds. What I'm applying to that weight is 88 pounds of tension. I'm putting in all of that effort back into that kettlebell, that way it becomes one with me. The moment I apply that extra pound of tension, it comes up off the ground. So watch this. Let's go through that sequence again. I'm going to chest up, pull back the shoulder blades. I'm gonna hinge from the hip. My feet are gripping the floor as hard as I can. Gonna meet my hands to the kettlebell. I'm gonna grip for dear life. I'm gonna pull back those shoulder blades. I'm gonna drive my knees slightly out, create that tension. Big breath through the stomach. When I'm ready, I'm gonna drive through my heels and I'm gonna go through a full lockout. Now, in this position, the one thing that my body wants to do right now is this. That is so comfortable, but it's also the weakest. So we go back up, chest up, pull back the shoulder blades, abs are always braced. Now in this position, I'm just gonna go through a hinge again. So big breath, hips go back, 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 back. When my hands meet or go at the level of my knee, I drop the hips and then I reset. So a lot went on there just to pick up 88 pounds. If I do this correctly, everything should be engaged.